This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damian, David, and Matt.
Hey, welcome everybody to another season preview edition of the Bat Flip Podcast. I am Matt here today with David, and we are going to talk today about the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox had one of the most active off seasons of any team. They made some really major moves coming off a season in which I believe they finished last last year, and they really just did a lot of they made some big moves. I mean, this is a team that they talked about wanting to spend some money and get out of the cellar that they've been in, and they have got a little bit of an interesting core. They still have the best farm system in baseball, and they went out and they really improved their team. So, David, what do you think the state of the Boston Red Sox is here starting off in 2025?
Yeah, it's a good spot, right? They went out and addressed a lot of their issues. They've pushed forward in a bunch of different ways with the starting pitching rotation. They've got a bunch of big signings with like Alex Bregman, and this team is in a really good spot with the prospects too, because they have I think three of the best prospects that you could bring up in midseason. So the team is going to get better as they go. I think there's some clear weaknesses, but they're clear weaknesses that you're going to be able to address mid-season with regard to the trade block, especially in the bullpen, right? Because I don't know that this bullpen is going to strike fear into the heart of anybody, but I really do like where they're positioned right now. And they're going to be able to go out and get the best closer on the block at the deadline and with this farm system. So internal improvements are going to continue, and whatever we think this opening day roster is, I think it's going to be way better by playoff time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can take a look here at the additions and subtractions from this offseason. And as we mentioned, there's a lot. They added Justin Wilson, just a reliever. Aroldis Chapman's going to come in and be their probably be their closer here to start the season. He'll be at least a high leverage arm in the back of their bullpen. They added Patrick Sandoval from the Angels, but he is currently recovering from Tommy John surgery or at least an internal brace procedure. So we don't know his time frame, but they did add him. But here's the big ones. You brought in Walker Buehler to be in that rotation. Very interesting pitcher because, he was once this ace for the best team in baseball, and then he had the injuries, and when he came back last year, he wasn't quite as good. But then in the playoffs, he pitched well. So you don't know if he came back and that was just kind of a fluke that his good start happened to be the playoffs, or if he actually figured something out. So that'll be very interesting to see. I believe he's on a 1-year deal with an option.
Yep.
Alex Bregman they brought in on a short-term high AAV deal. He's going to play third base or second base. It's kind of hard to say right now. That's a little bit of a situation we'll get into here in a little bit. But they brought in a guy who's been a really, really good high-level bat for a while for the Astros. He's got a good glove at third base. He's just an all-around really good player. They brought in Blake Sabol via trade. And then they brought in Garrett Crochet to be the ace in their rotation, and who had an excellent year last year with the White Sox. And they gave up a lot of prospect capital for him, but he looks to be the true ace that this team really needed to add to a rotation that, when healthy, is pretty good already. So, David, I guess, which one of these is more impactful, Alex Bregman or Garrett Crochet as an addition here?
It's Garrett Crochet for sure, right? He's an arm that I was in on as a potential like ace for a couple of years, right? He's got some of the nastiest stuff in baseball. He's runs like a 35% strikeout rate last season in a year where he played for the worst team in baseball, and also was kind of half shut down in midseason just to preserve his arm. And the Red Sox went out and got him without dealing any of their top 3 prospects, which I thought was a absolute steal. I thought that was the only way they could beat any other packages, but ultimately trading like Kyle Teal and Braden Montgomery, like those are really good prospects. But we're going to talk about these other guys. I don't think they're even quite as close as these other guys in terms of how good the prospects are. And being able to get out of the offseason with Garrett Crochet with that, and with like Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, and Kristian Campbell is crazy. That's a really good work by Craig Breslow and company. I think Bregman is a really good player, and I think their plan right now is to play him at second base. Devers has mentioned wanting to play third and wanting to be that guy at third base. I don't know that that's going to be best for the team. At the end of the day, Bregman at third, Devers at either first or DH is probably the best way for the team to go out and win games, and with like Kristian Campbell at second base. But for in the near term, I think they will play Devers at third, Bregman at second, and just try and do it, keep those prospects as like a break glass if emergency type situation. But I think that means Bregman isn't. It's not. He's just not as impactful as Crochet, but Bregman is a huge addition to this offense where there was kind of a hole in the right-handed side behind Devers. If we want to go to the offense, like now, I mean, I just the subtractions to touch on real quick. I don't know that these are very impactful. I don't really like Tyler O'Neill. Did not like Nick Pivetta. I just think those guys are guys you can improve on. I don't know that Walker Buehler is a big improvement on Nick Pivetta, but like I trust Walker Buehler's history a lot more. Pivetta is a guy that kind of always underwhelms me. So I love that this upgrade. It feels like an upgrade for the Red Sox here. And their pitching development's been really good for the past couple of years since Greg Breslow has got into place. I think he can really, thrive with the arms he's got.
Yeah, and you mentioned the subtractions. They've lost Danny Jansen, who is a pretty good catcher, but he was only there a half season. They also lost Lucas Sims, Luis Garcia. I think those bottom two are really big for the Red Sox. Because you mentioned it in our little intro there, that the bullpen for the Red Sox, I think it's pretty good still, but there's a little bit of variation with their bullpen. I think it's there's a lot of there's some high upside, high risk guys, and you think about Chris Martin and Kenley Jansen, both of those guys you're pretty sure are going to be good at least. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Chris Martin was elite last year, and Kenley Jansen was really good. He had a 3.29 ERA last year and 27 saves. I mean, he had a really good year. So, I mean, that's a lot of experience lost at the back of that bullpen, and that's a lot of just kind of certainty with their arms that they're not going to have going forward into the season. So we'll see if they're able to overcome that. But I guess we can move on and talk about the bats now. So we got Jarren Duran starting out in left field. Had an excellent year last year. Put up almost 7 WAR last year, which is crazy. Ceddanne Rafaela in center. That's a place to kind of look out for one of those prospects to know. Roman Anthony. Rafaela is a guy who he's plays a lot of positions, and he's been a good shortstop at times as well. So they might move him around, and the bat's really limited there. So Roman Anthony's a super prospect. They got Wilyer Abreu listed in right field. Alex Bregman currently listed at third base. We'll see how that works out. Trevor Story at short. They have David Hamilton listed at second base. That could be Bregman, and Devers could be third base. We'll see. Casas at first is pretty locked in. Devers, we got him listed as DH right now, but like I said, there's some variation there. And then Connor Wong behind the plate. It's good. It's gonna be back there, and I guess David, how do you see the positions here shaken out?
Yeah, this is a good roster, right? But I would say we've seen better rosters, and I think both of us picked the Red Sox to win the AL East in our predictions episode a couple of days ago. This roster's I don't think as good positionally as some of the other rosters in this league. We're going to talk about one later today that you'll see is in their competitive in their division. Their position players are better, but bottom line. But I really like the prospects here. I think that group can galvanize this offensive group into a much stronger spot, because the weaknesses are all covered by the prospects, right? Trevor Story is injured. He's usually injured. He just has not been able to stay healthy since he moved over to Boston from Colorado. And that stinks, but it's the truth. And if Story can stay healthy, right, Meyer isn't necessary yet. But as soon as Story goes down, Meyer comes up. And then, you've also got Kristian Campbell, who might be ready now. He might even start on opening day. Anthony probably is ready to start on opening day as well in center field. And that increases the depth of this bench when Rafaela can go to the bench and just play a spot start in whatever position you need him to. Those prospects to me galvanize this group. It's obviously a very solid group with a really high ceiling when you've got Duran, Bregman, Devers. Yoshida's injured. We didn't put him on the list, but he's a good hitter when healthy. He's just a guy that's going to have to be at the DH slot. I like this group a lot, but when you slot in Roman Anthony, who I think is a guy that can come up and hit right away. I think Kristian Campbell might even be a better hitter. He's getting comps to like Mookie Betts and stuff because he plays second base. Those two guys I think could change this offense from a really good offense to a really great offense very quickly. But Bregman raised the ceiling, right? If Devers was here and then you were scrounging to find a DH, I do think this team is not as impressive, but when they added Bregman, they went to the AL East favorites, in my opinion, just because you've got these prospects coming. There's now no hole at DH, right? It's a very clear upgrade all around, and this team is very, very good.
Yeah, and I think I agree where the whole thing changes here is when those prospects come up, because I'm a huge Roman Anthony believer.
Oh yeah.
And I like Kristian Campbell as well, but I think that if you switch out Rafaela in center and let him be more of that utility guy that plays elite defense and is super fast, plays a great base runner, if you do that and you can put Anthony out there, and obviously you can figure out the infield whether you bring Kristian Campbell into second base when he comes up, or you put Bregman at second, Devers at third, and DH Yoshida. Like the lineup becomes way deeper at that point. So I think that's very. I think that could be very formidable. It might be a little bit of a slow start offensively, but I think that's going to be very formidable when it fully comes into play. Looking at their bench, Carlos Narvaez is a decent backup catcher. He's a good defender, which they need because Connor Wong is not the best defensive catcher, to say the least.
Right.
Romy Gonzalez is just kind of fine utility guy. David Hamilton. We got Nick Sogard listed here. He was listed on Fangraphs. We made the slides, but like I said, a lot of this they're still figuring it out here with the Red Sox. Rob Refsnyder is there as well. He's a fine bench bat. Can pinch hit a little bit, do whatever. So yeah, I mean, I like this lineup. As it's listed here, it's not the best lineup, but I think it's one of those things where just a couple of things go right for them, and they go from being just a decent to a very good lineup here. And I'm kind of betting on those things to go right for this team. So, we'll see what happens there, but I guess we can move on and talk a little bit about the pitching. And I think this is kind of where I feel like the strength of this team lies at the moment. Now, the biggest issue that we have with their pitching is down at the bottom there, injuries. They are dealing with some injuries already, and but we could start off and talk about Garrett Crochet a little bit. He was absolutely phenomenal last year for the White Sox. Tanner Houck had a breakout year last year. He's definitely got the stuff to be in that number one, number two conversation for a good team. Walker Buehler we mentioned in our additions page, and then I've got currently listed Brian Bayo. He's currently going to be out for the very beginning of the season, but he should be back pretty early. And he's a very talented pitcher. I think he was a former top prospect, and he's shown some flashes at the big league level. And if you have him as your number 4, you feel pretty good about that. And then Cutter Crawford has a pretty good bit of big league experience. He's shown some flashes as well. He's not great, but he's a fine number 5. But then you talk about it, and he's going to miss the very beginning of the season too with some knee soreness. But neither one of those seem to be long-term issues. And then you look at the injured page. Lucas Giolito is there on the injured page. He missed last season due to Tommy John surgery, and he had pulled his hamstring in spring training. So he's going to miss a little bit of the season, a little bit more than those other guys, it sounds like. But that's another guy you can add in here and has a lot of upside to come in and really be a get big help in this rotation. And
Mhm.
then we'll see if you might get anything from Patrick Sandoval late in the season. He had the internal brace procedure, so he probably wouldn't be back till July or August at the earliest. Um, but this five that we've got listed here, it's pretty good in my opinion. I mean, I know
Mhm.
we've talked a little bit about Crochet already, but I guess out of Houck, Bayo, Crawford, I mean, do you think those guys can really fill out a competitive rotation, or do you think maybe Houck takes a step back and the other two guys don't really figure it out?
No, I think this is a competitive rotation for sure. I think this team is set up very well to succeed in the regular season, a deep regular season when you've got so many options, right? This is, what we have 9 guys on the list right here that are capable of starting. I think that opens it up to being really deep in terms of how well this rotation is built. You couple that together with the experience of a guy like Walker Buehler built into this rotation where now and Lucas Giolito effectively, where you've got 2 guys who can kind of, they've been there, across the 162 games. And then, Buehler in the playoffs he's been there for a long time. So I think this rotation is really good. I think as long as like Crochet stays healthy, which was a concern last year, but he was able to throw like 150 innings or something like that. So and he had been like kind of shut down and they took it easy, but it runs through Crochet. But like Tanner Houck and Bayo and them, they pitched really well last year. It was just that 4 or 5 slot seemed to be like a very big weak spot for the Red Sox. And they've gone out and upgraded that hugely this season. And where, Cutter Crawford was their 3 last year. And now he's pitching as the quote unquote 5. And I think Crawford's he's a good pitcher. Like he's a perfect number 5. He's the, one of those guys that, you run him out there. Yeah, you can score 2 or 3 runs off him, but that might be it. And we'll talk about the bullpen. I think you and I have a little bit differing thoughts on the bullpen, but the rotation is not a weak spot for this team. Richard Fitz is a good, a fill-in guy that'll be able to move in if there's injury in this group. Priester is a project, but Craig Breslow has been pretty good about fixing guys up and finding ways to get the most out of these pitchers. And I think Quinn Priester's former top prospect, former high draft pick, type of guy that has always had the stuff, but couldn't unlock it in Pittsburgh, right? He's since journeyed around the major leagues because nobody's been able to figure out how to get him to that successful level. But the Red Sox are comfortable enough to start him in the rotation, which tells me that, even if he's just kind of the 5th option, the backup option, he's still only 25 years old. There's still some ceiling there. And I think if there's a team that can figure it out, it's the Red Sox.
Yeah. And you mentioned Richard Fitz. They just announced that he's going to be their 4 starter for the first couple of weeks today.
Cool.
So very excited to see what he can do. He's an Auburn guy, so always got to love that. But yeah, we can move on and look at the bullpen real quick. And this is a very interesting bullpen, and I think the main reason is because it's so volatile, especially in that back end. Aroldis Chapman and Liam Hendricks, for different reasons, are extremely volatile. Aroldis Chapman, he still throws 100 miles an hour and he still strikes everybody out, but he's gotten to where it's almost inevitable that he's going to walk at least 1 or 2 guys every outing he has. And it's just, it's really, really, really tough to be a lockdown closer when you're walking 5, 6 guys per 9 innings. And, that worries me, and that adds a lot of volatility to him. But if he can find the control, he's still got the best stuff of anybody. I mean, he's throwing 100 miles an hour from the left side, and it's tough. And then Liam Hendricks, last time we saw him was still very, very good as a closer, but he hasn't pitched since 2023, and that was just 5 innings in 2023 before his injury started. Last time we saw him in a full season, he put up a 2.81 ERA with 37 saves for the White Sox in 2022. So, both of those guys, if Hendricks is healthy and Chapman can just limit the walks a little bit, then this back end of the bullpen is, I mean, it's elite. I mean, that could be the best combination, one of the best combinations in baseball if it goes right. But at the same time, there's reason to believe that neither one of these things go right, and this bullpen ends up really very weak.
Yeah, I think this bullpen is kind of weak, actually. I think you're all asking an awful lot. We talk about, walks per 9 innings. That's a little less valuable for a reliever. So I will give you the walks percentage that Aroldis Chapman runs, but he's running a 15% walk rate.
Yep.
Compare that to his 40% strikeout rate, right? He's very nasty, but this is a guy who really doesn't know where it's going. And his command is a little bit shakier as he's gotten older, but he's been able to do this for several seasons now, right? He's run that big walk rate for several seasons. The strikeout rate isn't really diminishing. The stuff isn't really diminishing. I do think Chapman fits in well as a setup man, but I'm not relying on Liam Hendriks. I don't believe Liam Hendriks, you can't just anything you get from him this season in terms of innings pitched is a good thing. That him getting healthy and getting back on the mound is, I think, a win. But you can't say, well, I want the Liam Hendriks of old. We don't know if that's there. He's 36 years old. It might be there, right? He might come out and be nasty, but I'm not going to bank on that. I'm certainly not going to bet on that before the season as I'm a Red Sox fan or a Red Sox, front office employee. We're looking to win the World Series. We're looking to go out here and win the AL East, and you can't be going, well, I sure hope and pray Liam Hendriks is healthy to do that. I do think Justin Slayton is underrated, and I think he moves into a potentially even the closer's role for as this season progresses. But those two back end guys are not enough. And that's where I think this team makes a huge trade in the middle of the season. My number one idea here is Ryan Helsley immediately. I think if you put Helsley in this bullpen and slide everybody down, then this bullpen gets to being pretty good. But for now, I think it's a major weakness. And it's the point at which this team could break, where the rotation is really good, the offense is really solid, but they could lose games that they don't need to, because I think that race in the AL East is going to be very close, and you can't have a weak bullpen if you're going to be in a close race, and the difference might be 2 or 3 games. If this bullpen blows 2 or 3 games, that could be the difference in the Red Sox not winning this division.
Yeah, I do want to shout out one more guy in this bullpen that we haven't mentioned yet. That's Garrett Whitlock. When he's been a reliever in his career, he's been excellent. When he's been a starter, he's been okay. And he's going to be a reliever this year. And I think that's a very good thing because that adds depth. He's a guy that can go multiple innings. And as you mentioned, if a bullpen lacks depth, when you have a guy that can go 2 really good innings, that helps a lot. And I really like Garrett Whitlock. I think he could have a great year and coming back out of the bullpen again, and could add some depth. Because if you add him and one of Chapman and Hendricks themselves, and you got Slayton in there too, then you got at least a decent bullpen. And I think the way the rest of this team is built, a decent bullpen is good enough for the first half of the season. So we'll see. That definitely could be a limiting factor because of the volatility on those back end guys. And if they both struggle, then this team could end up having a major problem there. But I guess we can move on and segue that into here, looking at the outlook for the season. The 2025 Red Sox have an over-under win total of 86.5. So, David, do you want to take the over-under on that?
I'm taking the over for sure. I've picked this team to win the AL East. I think you have to win at least 90 games to get there. So I'm taking the over, for sure. But again, I think the best path forward for this team is to make a big splash in the bullpen, right? If they do that, and you could do that early in the season, theoretically, but they're going to shuffle the pieces. They got to find who that closer is. My guess right now is that it's going to be Slayton. I think you have to go with the guy with a lot more command and let Chapman be the mop up 8th inning, 7th inning fireman whenever you need a couple of big outs against big lefty bats guy. I don't want to limit Chapman to the 9th inning for that. I want the command guy in the 9th inning. So I think the closer is going to be Slayton, but then you've got an unknown guy working at closer who's, off a good year, but he wasn't off a good year at closer, right? Kenley Jansen was closing, and that's a Hall of Fame closer there, right? So the hole in this bullpen is scary, but it doesn't scare me off of them being a 90-win team. I think they're going to get 90. The offense is so strong. You've got so many good prospects that are just going to galvanize this team as they go. The signing of Bregman was just so huge. And taking them into equal roster consideration with the Orioles and the Yankees around them. They don't have, I guess, that upper end echelon superstar like the Yankees and the Orioles, but I think the roster is a lot deeper, and I like the rotations a lot better than either of those other two teams. Like the starting rotation is going to carry this team. So love the over under. I like the odds to win the AL East. I think they're the favorite. I think this is the team that goes out and wins the AL East. Garrett Crochet was my favorite like off-season addition for anybody to make, other than when Kyle Tucker was available. Like, and so when Crochet went to the Red Sox, I was like, well, the Red Sox are gonna have the best off-season, and then they also signed Alex Bregman. So yeah, this is a huge. I don't even think we made as a big enough deal about how big it is that they got Garrett Crochet, because this is a team that did not have an ace last year, and now they have a guy than Garrett Crochet that he's Cy Young favorite probably, right?
Yeah, he's definitely a contender. Yeah, and I'm going to take the over as well. I mean, you think you lined it up pretty good there. I think that there is some world where this doesn't work out for the Red Sox this year. We mentioned the volatility in the bullpen, and then you can also have the world where, your starting lineup, you've got some holes in there at the beginning of the season, and if those prospects don't come up and perform well, then you could see a little bit of you could see the offense be a little bit sluggish at times, but I believe in those prospects, man. I really, really like both of the guys that I think will be impacts this year, and Campbell and Anthony. And I really think that that's going to boost this team when they come up, because you mentioned the lack of a superstar. I think there's a world where Roman Anthony comes up and he is that guy, right away, in ways that we've seen, like, when Ronald Acuna and Juan Soto both came up for their teams that year and boosted them into the playoffs. And, looking at Corbin Carroll a couple years ago as a rookie, boosting that team into the playoffs and into the World Series. I think that you're looking at, a situation where you could end up having major contributions from those young guys that really round this roster out. But as you mentioned, the odds to make the playoffs, they are a favorite to make the playoffs here, minus 105. Odds to win the AL East, plus 350. I don't necessarily disagree with those odds, but I'm going to take them. I think that there's a good reason for them being an underdog here, but I'm going to bet on the talent that they've got. And then the World Series odds, plus 2,000. That might honestly be a good bet as well, because, with this rotation, if they're healthy coming down the stretch, and, those guys, that I think they're going to be a better team at the end of the season than they are at the beginning of the season.
Right.
So that could end up, they could end up being a dangerous postseason team. But I guess we can wrap it up here. Any final thoughts?
My final thought is that Kristian Campbell last season in his entire major league run or minor league run had a 180 WRC plus, and we might be underrating his impact, which is wild because he's not the number one prospect somehow. It's somehow still Roman Anthony, but they're both so good. I think this team is going to be a really fun watch this season. I think that you have a team as historically significant as the Red Sox finally putting it all together, making really big moves in free agency and on the trade block. This is a really good situation that they've found themselves in, despite, we've run into talking about roster crunches, budget crunches, etc. But they went out and signed Alex Bregman for 30, 40 million a season. Right. So this is a great spot to be in. It's good to see the Red Sox back. And I am looking forward to my pick for the AL East, putting it all together and going on a run here in the middle of the season.
Yep, for sure. All right, I guess that'll wrap it up for us. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.